Well, 2017 is drawing to a close, and if I was to look back, well, you'd actually find out that this was a year of massive data breaches and cyber attacks. Pettier, not Pettier, WannaCry, all sorts of ransomware. What if I told you that the worst is yet to come, and is to come in 2018? Well, the scale and frequency of these attacks could be getting a lot bigger, a lot worse, and also, well, the hacker is always going to be a step ahead of you. Businesses and individuals need to be wary of what 2018 has in store. And just to understand what 2018 has in store, I'm joined by Karthik Shahani. Karthik is, well, the cybersecurity chief at IBM in South Asia. Karthik, thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thank you so much, Ayush.
Karthik, you've come out with a report where you're essentially talking about the 5 things that we all have to watch out for globally.
Yes.
And the top of that list for me here in India or anywhere around the world seems to be this artificial intelligence battle. Because now, the way you're looking at it, I believe, is that artificial intelligence being used by, well, hackers, and those being used in those attacks could be the biggest concern for businesses around the world.
True. If you would look at what is it that one does to figure out whether it's a human or not, are the essential features which allows you access or no access. So you would get these things like the CAPTCHA code, you'll get, find out which is the picture which has got a car in it, those kind of things which they believe is human behavior. With artificial intelligence progressing the way it is, just like we are using it to take out information, cull out information and do analytics for cyber criminals, it works the other way around too. They start mimicking human behavior, and they'll be able to start doing a lot of things that products today feel humans are doing, but now can be done artificially.
Do you know, Karthik, it becomes very interesting considering what's happening in the global technology landscape. You have Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg publicly arguing on the future of AI. We have Indian business leaders as well actually saying, well, maybe it's all hype. But it becomes interesting because, well, the Orwellian way of looking at it becomes this AI apocalypse is coming. Robots are going to take over. The way you're looking at it is, it becomes a lot more worrisome, because essentially what you're saying is that if the hackers were to be using such methods, one, to attack well, businesses and individuals, even where AI was being used as existing technology, that is gullible now, is vulnerable.
True. So the way that we are looking at AI, whether it's machine learning, whether it's cognitive, or artificial intelligence doing scripting work or culling out information, the way we are looking at it is that it's never going to replace a human. What we're looking at AI doing is being able to help humans, because the workload will become so much, it'll become humanly impossible to start discerning what information to look at and what not to look at. AI will then be able to filter out that information and give it to a human to make decisions. When it comes to the way that a cyber criminal will look at it, he's got a traditional way of doing phishing or social engineering.
Yeah.
What's stopping him from trying to mimic that behavior using AI? And then it's going to be this spy versus spy that you have, and that cat and mouse game will continue.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, the good have got a lead over the cyber criminals. So what I'm optimistic about is that lead's going to be there, and hopefully that lead will take us through 2018, but we will see emergence of things like this coming up in the year.
And another key trend that you highlight in your report is all about identity theft. That becomes a big deal, Karthik, not only because you talk about, of course, moving away from identifiers like social security numbers, considering the number of data records that are being stolen by hacks around the world. We saw it happen with the iCloud hacks,
yes,
with Target, with Sony, with Ashley Madison, with Zomato over here, with Uber as well. It's a very touchy topic for a lot of us, because everyone tuned in right now would say, hey, as a customer, my data is completely vulnerable to these attacks. And these two guys doing this video right now telling me it could get a lot worse next year as well.
Yes. So the point that we're trying to get around is that there are two aspects to it. One aspect to it is that people had a limited number of applications that they used, a limited number of places that they would go to. And so there were limited passwords to remember and get access to it.
That's right.
Some were important, some were not that important. So is it humanly possible to remember all these? You don't. You can't. So that became problem number one. Problem number two was, how do we ensure the authenticity of the person getting on? And then from there on to another side, and finally to a financial side, which will mean financial losses for an individual. So it's all these apps are getting so interconnected and so interlocked that unless you have something which is very, very, very personal to that person, that no one can take away from him, it's going to be very difficult to provide that access control and authentication. Biometrics is one such thing. No one can take your fingers away. I'm sure they can, but not the right way. So
right.
You've got biometrics, you've got retina, face detection, voice detection. A combination of these parameters firstly makes it much easier to get authenticated to the right identity, and also makes it easier for the person to navigate this expanding application world.
But Karthik, it becomes a lot more worrisome again because it's portentous considering what's happening here in India. Right? When we talk about the Aadhaar project, the biggest such project to be undertaken anywhere in the world, privacy advocates have been worried for the longest time, for 2 years. Now that we know that we have a right to privacy in this country, the Supreme Court has confirmed that. The technological aspects of it, that, well, is what makes people wary of adopting a technology like that, and considering how ubiquitous Aadhaar is becoming. You need your Aadhaar for everything, and there'll be perhaps more clarity on it by the end of next month. But the point being, Karthik, is that does that become a concern there as well? Since you're talking about moving away from identifiers like that, would you say that that would be a healthy practice in a country like India, which is trying very hard to move towards linking with those identifiers in the first place?
So what we are now discussing is another aspect of it. The technology part is one part, and then you come into the next part, which is the people and processes. Mm-hmm. And will people follow the rule? Will processes be sacrosanct? And then will they all link into a technology that will deliver? So the point really is, whether it's India or whether it's any other country, if the three elements are not managed and executed properly, there is every chance of it to fail. It can fail at a technology level, a people level, or a process level. And what worries most people is that technology is something that carries on. It's predictable. People and processes aren't. Mm-hmm. And it'll depend on how good these processes and the people using it are. So that's where the question mark's going to come.
And would companies like IBM and companies that are heavily invested in cybersecurity, when they're looking at emerging technologies, one thing we can't deny from 2017 has been what blockchain has done.
Right.
Even from an investor standpoint, and considering how many, well, the exchanges are looking at that technology, banks are looking at that technology, and Bitcoin per se.
Right.
And Bitcoin essentially, well, works on the blockchain technology. Yes. Could emerging technologies such as blockchain, or should I not call them emerging, perhaps they're becoming, they're being used a lot more, could they also perhaps make a cybersecurity company's job a little easier, considering how transparent and accountable those processes really are?
I'm sure there are not only blockchain, and there'll be many more blockchain-like technologies which will come up and which will help in making this much easier. For everything that we do, as long as we've got an audit trail, mm-hmm. that's what makes the difference. Mm-hmm. If you don't have an audit trail, that's where the problem starts. Mm-hmm. So technologies like blockchain, which allow you an audit trail, show you how things have come, how and where we can get to the source of it,
right,
are all technologies that help. Things like a couple of years ago, we had something called the reverse proxy, which allowed you to look back. All these technologies and more will help make life so much better and more secure for an individual.
Well, that's on a positive note, Karthik, but something that sounds scary from your report is what ransomware, something that bothered a lot of us in 2017. what it can do to the Internet of Things. Now, personally, I think the Internet of Things is a fascinating technology. The fact that I'm wearing a smartwatch right now, the fact that, the country's smart cities plan could be revolutionized by the use of IoT. If you're telling me ransomware is coming for even IoT, that's a very scary thought when it comes to even, considering massive scale implementation of projects like, say, smart cities in India.
Yep. So Ayush, I'm going to give you two views to this, and I believe that there is a scary view of it, and then there is an optimistic view to it. And the scary view of it is, what if the ransomware started impacting DVRs, started impacting devices, started impacting sensors.
Security cameras.
Security cameras. So what we have is a factory where all the sensors go wacko. Nothing works. A hospital where the operating theater or robotic machine just stops functioning. That's the scary part of it. And then someone says you don't pay up, you can't get the sensors to be used. That's the scary part of it. The optimistic part of it is the genesis of Petya and the genesis of ransomware comes from the fact that you haven't patched in time.
That's right.
You haven't done the process part that you're supposed to do. Had you done that, you would never have faced it. So just like I said and mentioned before, while we have this, if we have a breakdown in the process or in the people following that process, you will have problems. So what we probably need to do is be more careful about the fact that look at what we can get into. Let's get the process more stringent. Let's get the people more aware. Let people understand what the implications are. And this talk probably is some way of letting people know the scary bit, and if they did the right thing, how they can get away from it.
Well, interestingly, when we talk about that, then even individuals, it's not just, companies looking at this, or enterprises or governments watching this, it's even individuals looking at these particular 5 points that you come up with, and they can, even their contribution can really go a long way in preempting some of these threats.
Yes.
But, Karthik, and when we talk about the genesis of these threats, now the popular perception is that if it's a big virus attack or if it's a ransomware attack, while a lot of it, in terms of, the alleviation or, threat response happens on, by dealing with someone on the dark web who's selling your data, or someone asking for a set number of bitcoins or some sort of cryptocurrency. Another key, the perception seems to be that the threat originates from, say, somewhere in Eastern Europe, China. Frankly, it could originate from anywhere. It could be Bangalore.
Sure.
It could be somewhere on the west coast of the US. It could be in Russia. It could be anywhere, right? It's such a connected world. But based on your report, there's a continent that's emerging as the new, hub of all of this activity. And that happens to be Africa.
That's right. I think I would look not only at it from an Africa standpoint. We're looking at, if I was to look at threats and I had a pattern behind it, I would go for the pattern. And if look at the old adage, something got lost somewhere, you go to the police station, he rounds up all the usuals. And so that's why we always look at the usuals coming from the Korean superhighway, we look at it from the CIS countries, we look at all these regions which we feel are the usual roundup. But it comes from any country that is a new or developing standpoint of utilization of technology. And Africa now is slowly developing and coming into that state. The telecommunication is getting better, the banking systems are getting better and interconnected. There are more people on the net there than there were. Now, the key part in that is, it's not only originating from Africa, but Africa also be a victim.
That's right.
And so it is a new hub that's coming up. It's a brand new center where there will be higher utilization of internet. So originating or landing, both are going to be risky in this very large new continent that's coming up.
Which brings me to my next point, Karthik, which is essentially, Well, we are ending the year with this, so I'm going to end it on a positive note. Perhaps it can be a happy new year if we were to look at a few hygiene practices, and perhaps enterprises and individuals could look at this from, well, healthier ways, like perhaps detect and protect. Like you said, keep up to date with your patches, your security patches, and your OS updates. What's the way forward if we were to really take these threats head on and perhaps have a safer 2018?
I think there are a couple of things. One is, if you can detect fast and respond even faster, you're going to reduce the amount of information or data that's going out. We have in India been focusing mostly on the detection part. And for the most part, we have mostly got what we call as SOCs, the Security Operations Centers, PSUs, companies, all have gone ahead and putting these SOCs in place, which is being able to detect. What we need to look at is the response mechanism. So what's really, really clear is have a quick detect, have a quick response mechanism, and then be able to take that information and manage your breach. Management of a breach is very, very important. That is, how do you communicate to the media? How do you communicate to your shareholders? How do you communicate internally as well as externally as to what's happened? What are those some things that are most critical for running of our organization that you have been able to do and safeguard and hence protect your organization? So I think what's more important than anything else today is the ability for us to be able to recognize our threats, categorize it as high or low priority, have technology to protect it, and follow those processes that we have. That's really, really what's most important.
No, because it becomes interesting that you say that, considering, well, Karthik, what's happening around the world, especially with American companies that are gearing up for what's happening in Europe with GDPR, and to get their practices up to speed by, I think, May of next year.
That's right, that's right.
It's not just Europe, and we have to give credit where it's due. Even the Indian government is looking, out here in India, we're also looking at a data protection framework, which is the need of the hour, based on what you just mentioned. So will it really be now that you guys, for the longest time, have been talking about these threats? We've seen what kind of ramifications there are and what the consequences are of these threats hitting us. Would it mean that regulation follows? And perhaps is that the answer in perhaps this whole massive cybersecurity game?
So I'll look at a very, very basic reason for something like this happening. Earlier in our conversation, we spoke about people, their information, and the right for someone, or the fundamental right for someone to be able to have the ability to say, I want to share my information or not share my information. And where the person doesn't even know that his information is getting shared in the right or the wrong manner. So I think these regulations are extremely important to keep basic human rights in place. Okay? So that's a precinct that we're looking at. What is it that we do after that is, those people who violate should be punished. And so the penalties are massive. It's like almost 4% of your yearly turnover if you're not complying to the GDPR regulations. It's a huge amount.
But that's not the case over here.
No. And that is an issue.
That's right.
That is an issue because we come into a point that we start saying cost versus penalty. And if the cost of the technology is far, far greater than the penal value, why would someone do it? So GDPR is one of the things that's important in GDPR is they've given a timeline. They've got a huge penalty. They're asking you to follow certain rules. And these rules are not, unreasonable. They're reasonable. What it's doing is now opening up the world to a lot of people to do safe trade with Europe, which was not possible earlier.
Yeah.
So we look at GDPR and privacy regulations as a two-sided coin, because one side we're ensuring regulations which allow more trade, more information share, and the other side say if you don't follow it, you're going to get penalized for it. So be careful. I think that's the way to go. While we make rules, we need to have a way of executing them. and we have a way of prosecuting them. And that is what's most important if India is to take this forward.
Absolutely. On that note, Karthik, thanks so much for speaking with us. And that's what we need to do moving forward. Well, if you've been watching, we weren't trying to scare you, saying it's not so happy a new year. We really hope you have a very happy, a very safe new year. These are just the things that you should watch out for the next time you're logging onto your computer, the next time you're doing something with your fingerprint. Well, just be careful. And these are the trends that Karthik and I brought you on Bloomberg Quint. Thanks so much for watching, and have a very good new year. So I think